This is Athletes as Educators with former pro basketball player, championship winning coach, and author Angela R. Lewis. Angie Lewis interviews current and former athletes who are passionate about sharing the lessons they've learned and the experiences that have shaped their lives. A resource for parents, a guide for student athletes, a source for current and former athletes, keys to transition off the court. Welcome to the Athletes as Educators podcast with Angela R. Lewis.
Welcome to the show today. I have a very special guest, Shaina Wiel. Shaina is the founder of Minority in Sports. It started as a group me and is exploding. There are so many amazing minorities who are involved in sports who are in this group, and that's where we met. So, Shaina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Will you talk a little bit about why you started MIS and just your vision for the future and how it has grown?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I originally just started it as a group me. It actually grew out of another group me, which was the Minorities in Media group, and I noticed that there were a number of us who actually worked in sports, and we kept having smaller conversations on the side. So I really just started so we wouldn't flood the media group, and I decided to invite some other people who I had worked with in the industry to just come in this group so we can kind of exchange resources and kind of give each other, a heads up. And the group ended up growing really quickly and in an awesome way, and we are at now over, I would say, like 315 members in a little under 11 months. So it's great. I mean, and in terms of the future, I am looking to actually turn this group into a legitimate network where we will be becoming an official LLC. We'll be rolling out a program for college students called the MIS Next program. We'll be producing content, and we will continue to do our core mission, which is to highlight and celebrate people of color in the industry. So if you look at our website or any of our digital platforms, you'll see that our motto is we are the diverse people behind your favorite athletes, your favorite teams, content, brands, etc. So my mission and my goal is to always highlight and kind of promote and celebrate the people of color who work behind the scenes and kind of help us to get that seat at the table and make it an even playing field in the industry.
Your work is invaluable. I remember when I first got into the group, I felt like I was reconnected with all my long lost friends. And it's just all these people from all over the country and the world. There's some people in other countries doing amazing work, and it's extremely affirming.
I was just going to say, it grew into so much more than I could have ever imagined it to be. And it's just dope to see, number one, the industry is so small, and you don't even realize that half the people in the group that you didn't even really know you've worked with before. Mm-hmm. And so we were all kind of separated by one degree of separation anyway. But, no, it's just good to have a safe space where, we can all just kind of connect. A lot of us go through the same things in the office that we may not be able to express because we are, one of a few in our places of work. But it's just cool to see others who look like you who are doing awesome things. And if I could even give a really, really quick example.
Absolutely.
If you saw recently or a while back, the Carmelo Anthony gave a cancer patient and his family a new car over the holidays. And it's amazing, and it's something great that, everyone is looking at Carmelo Anthony for, and he's awesome, and the Knicks are awesome. But honestly, two members of our group were the ones to drive that. We're the ones to conceive the idea, put it together, and make sure it happened. So shout out to Chris Jean and Tiffany Reeves for making that happen. They are awesome members, MIS, as well as, part of the community relations team over at the Knicks. So I just love seeing stuff like that, and I love promoting everyone in the group so people know that, there are people who look like us in the industry who are doing some amazing, amazing, amazing things.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, because that video was so good. And the fact that we can know who's behind the scenes on it makes a huge difference, because we would have never known. We would have just saw the video on Sports
No.
Center and we would have been like, oh, Carmelo's so dope, which he is, and it's great, but we wouldn't have known the people behind it.
Right. Exactly. And, I know that, most of us who work in the industry don't do it for the recognition or the accolades, but I always think it's important to celebrate those type of people, because they're the ones that are making everything happen.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who make your favorite athlete look really good. So
Exactly.
they
So many
deserve
people.
the recognition, too.
Yep, so many people behind the scenes doing really great work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
One of the things that has happened this year that we talked about a lot is social justice, and I kneel with Cap and everything that happened with Colin Kaepernick. Will you talk a little bit about the conversations we were having in the group and why this group was a really safe space for us during this time?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year, because I feel like a lot of social justice issues had really come to the forefront. 2015, we started seeing a lot of it, 2014, 2015, but 2016, I feel like, is when you started really seeing voices being heard, where people really started expressing themselves on how to make change as opposed to just reacting to what's been happening. And our group, for example, to me, was really important because, especially in the sports industry and in the athletic space, a lot of us are the only person of color or one of the few that work in our offices. So it's incredibly hard to either support someone or to discuss how you feel when most of the people don't look like you or who don't come from the same background as you. And that's just something that's just well known about the industry, that is, a certain type of person who kind of dominates the industry. And so to me, it was really important for us to have a space where we could come in and just kind of, do self-care, where we all made sure that we were helping each other or checking on each other to see how people were feeling after an incident, or expressing our feelings or support. If you supported Colin Kaepernick and you thought that what he was doing was important, you had a space where you can come in and openly talk about it and openly talk about your support. Whereas if you worked for the NFL or even for the Niners, you may not have been able to outwardly express that. And I heard that from a number of people in the group who either work directly with the league or may work with some brands that he works with, who were just like, I'm so happy that we have this space, because I can't talk about this in the office, or I can't talk about how I support him. So to me, it was really important for us to have that space to just discuss it, speak with other like-minded people, and other people who understand what you're going through as a person of color in a predominantly white space, as well as self-care. And people like to overlook this whole notion of self-care, not realizing that, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your mental emotions and sometimes let things out and express yourself in order for you to deal with it. So I thought MIS was an extremely important space this year for that alone, for social justice.
It was, and I know that it'll continue to be, because it's the space where you can have the conversation that, like you mentioned, you can't have in other places, and everyone doesn't agree all the time. So I don't want people to hear this and think, well, everyone's just in there always agreeing. No, there are some conversations where people express how they feel, and it's not all, this one mindset and one viewpoint about the situation.
Absolutely. No, we aren't one big happy kumbaya group who all agree on the same thing. And honestly, I think that's what makes the group so dynamic and amazing, is that you do have people with differing opinions and people who can actually speak to that and back up and fight for their opinion. Because you have people who in the group who are someone of color who didn't agree with what Kaepernick was doing, and they didn't agree with, his method, and which is fine. And we are open to all that. And one of the things that I always like to express is to make sure that, we give each other respect for what you're doing, for everyone's opinion. So if you don't agree with something that someone else is saying, you can say so, but you have to talk about it in a respectful manner where we can actually have a conversation. There's no bashing anyone for their opinion, but the group, like I said, is a safe space for us all to kind of just get out our thoughts and our feelings so we can actually deal with what is happening.
And one of the things that I think is pretty powerful about the group is there is action taken. So it's not just a bunch of people chatting about random stuff during the day. It's, hey, I'm looking for this, I need that, and how can we support each other? And people move to action for you, which makes the group so powerful.
Absolutely. That was one of the mandates that I had for the group, and it's why, unfortunately, I'm not accepting recent graduates or college students at the moment. And while we will be having the MIS Next program for them, but I wanted this to be a group where you can give as well as receive. So it's not just, asking for job opportunities, but also being able to provide resources and help for different things. So if you, and you, like you said, you've seen it in the group. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
You've seen it in the group all the time. My dogs are going crazy. You've seen it in the group all the time. Somebody will come in and be like, hey, I'm looking to do work on project X. I need athletes who are into this. Or just a perfect example, actually. We have an ESPN talent producer in the group, and I remember he came in one day, and was around the conversation of CTE and various mental issues going on with the NFL, and he wanted to get a psychiatrist to come on and speak. And, he preferred someone of color, someone who understood the majority of the league from a cultural perspective, and someone who is not, just your typical white doctor who comes on and immediately, you have 4 or 5 people coming in saying, I know someone, I know a psychiatrist, I'll send you over some names. So, it goes beyond just traditional sports in our group, and that's what I like because it shows the different faces of how sports work and how, the whole industry turns. So,
that's a really good point.
Yes, we're a very, very supportive group. I'm sorry.
No, I said that's a really good point, and it is an extremely supportive group. And you bring me to something that I think you'll be able to give exceptional insight on. What are some opportunities that you see often go untapped by minorities in the sports industry?
I think that a lot of people pay attention to the non-traditional routes. A lot of people, when you're looking at working in sports, you're thinking, I'm going to work with the league or I'm going to work with the team, not realizing there are so many different companies, there's so many different opportunities outside of just the traditional things that, everyone may think of outside of being an athlete. So a perfect example, it's kind of sports, but I am from the island of Curaçao, and we have a group of finance students that come every year who they usually come to visit traditional finance companies. And when a friend of mine reached out to me this year asking if I could connect them to any finance companies for the students to go to, this year I didn't have anyone. So I put it in the group and just casually mentioned that I have a group of like 30 kids coming from Curaçao who are finance students. Does anyone's company, would anyone mind them coming to visit their company to talk about finance? And we had Ricky Dean, who was over at the National Basketball Players Association, which isn't a quote-unquote traditional sports company, even though it kind of is in terms of the NBA, but a lot of people don't think about, the Players Association side and what they do. Immediately, she was like, we love to do things like that and coordinated efforts to bring these students. And we had them come in and they spoke with someone on the finance team to talk about finance and contract negotiations and how that relates to the NBA. And it was just something so different for them. They never thought, that they had an opportunity to work in sports because they thought, like, I don't want to go work for a team or a league, or with some player, not realizing that you have this company, the Players Association, which is something completely different, that they can still kind of go the finance route. So for them, it was cool because it wasn't a traditional finance route like they thought. So, that speaks to the support as well as some of the non-traditional things that you can kind of do in sports.
Oftentimes people think about being talent on the screen or coaching, and a lot of young people especially playing. But to your point, there are so many more opportunities that people aren't aware of.
Right. You can pretty much take any passion that you have and relate it to sports in some way. Any passion, there's a company that does it in relation to sports. Because if you think about it, sports is the number one industry that never has issues when it comes to a recession or economic crisis. They are always on the up and up. So every company works in sports in some way. We had someone who worked for JP Morgan Chase in the group who, when you think of Chase, it's not a sports company, but they have an entire division that does nothing but work on their sports sponsorships. And if you take a quick look around the sports industry, you will start to notice that Chase sponsors a lot when it comes to sports, especially in basketball and tennis world. They sponsor a lot. If you look at companies like American Express, which sponsors pretty much everything, and Samsung, these are not traditional sports companies, but their sponsorship dollars that they throw into sports are in the millions upon millions per year. So, you can just look at other opportunities that are not your traditional sports companies.
Absolutely. Because sports touches so many different industries, and it touches so many, and it's a great tool because of our culture's love for sports and for athletes.
Exactly. And I think our group represents that really well. If you look at the different companies that are in our group, we have pretty much someone from every company.
Absolutely. I'm with Shaina Wiel. She is the founder of Minority in Sports. It's missportsbiz.org. Find out more information about the group. Join the group if you're a minority professional looking to network and to give of your gifts and talents into the sports world. We were just talking about some of the different careers in sports and how sports has been this huge platform for social justice. Shaina, I want to shift a little bit here and talk more about your background and how you got to this point today. Will you talk about when you first began working in sports and how that helped shape who you are?
Sure. I, for one, did not take the traditional route, meaning I didn't start with a huge company like, let's say, at ESPN or with a team and kind of just work my way up. I was just one of those people who bounce around a lot because I just really wanted to find what I was super passionate about. So I actually started interning. I had graduated from college and was trying to figure out how I can get into the industry. And at the time, I wanted to be an agent, which is interesting because, one, you don't see many black agents and you definitely don't see a lot of female agents. So I decided to go intern for a sports agency, moved out to Chicago, and interned for Priority Sports and Entertainment, which is an amazing sports agency representing a lot of NFL and NBA players and some foreign basketball EuroLeague players. So started interning there, and then after I was done with that internship, I went on to work for the New Jersey Nets at the time, pre-Brooklyn, so they were kind of in like a transition period, and which was interesting because there was a lot happening on the front office side of the team where it's like you had a team that was still playing as the New Jersey Nets, but a front office who was focused on moving to Brooklyn. So it was a very interesting and fun time, but I learned so much about sales and marketing from doing that one, super, super entry-level job. And if I can give any quick advice, Absolutely. It would be kind of find something that you can take from any job, no matter if it's a job that at the time may seem like it sucks or it's not fun. Because we were I think we finished the season, 12-70 that year. So it was, a losing season. We were going for the record of worst NBA start in league history. It was a crazy, crazy time, but I appreciated it because it forced me to get creative with marketing and trying to sell tickets. And that was before, social media was really big. So we literally had call sheets in front of us, no computers and a phone. And we were supposed to just call 100 numbers a day and try to sell them tickets to a team that was losing, a team in New Jersey that wasn't claiming New Jersey. They had even taken New Jersey off of their jerseys. So they didn't want the words New Jersey associated with the team at all, but we were still playing there, so you had a whole fan base that felt alienated. And they were losing on top of that. So it was a very interesting time, but I had learned so much in terms of being creative. So after that season was done, I decided to go to grad school. I went to Columbia to get my master's, and then I worked at ESPN for 3 years after that in the ad sales department. And after that, I kind of just freelanced and did some branding and PR and marketing with some NFL players and some publicists. And now I am where I'm at now, which is doing social media for a media company that covers women's sports. So kind of been all over the place, but like I said, I'm trying to figure out exactly where's my best fit, because I realized that a lot of the traditional roles were just not for me. I was not a fan of the ad sales world. It was cool, it's interesting, it was great to learn how all the TV deals and the sponsorship behind those happened, but I was just not, it wasn't my truth really to be, selling ads and stuff like that. So, but in the meantime, I kind of really found my passion with minorities in sports, and the way it's growing is something that I could have never expected. So hopefully we'll be doing that full time soon.
Thank you for that overview. What were some turning points for you? You mentioned being in one now, and you talked about going from working with the New Jersey / Brooklyn Nets at the time. Cannot imagine how that must have been, calling people, knowing that it was going to be over soon. And so what were the turning points? How did you know when it was time to make a move?
Well, I made a lot of moves. But for me, it's just mostly just not being happy and realizing that, it was starting to feel like a job, and not just, a job, but just not being able to utilize my skills. So for a lot of these positions, I just started to feel like a robot, where I was just coming in and just, doing things because it's supposed to be done, and not necessarily having the opportunity or working with people who kind of understand the creative side, because it's just, you have a lot of, this industry has been in the works for decades. So you have a lot of people who are kind of set in their ways in terms of how things work. They're like, this has worked in the past, it's been successful, so this is how it should be done. So that, to me, has been some of my biggest turning points. Has been mostly kind of coming to work and feeling like it's just a routine, and not necessarily being able to utilize my skills and be creative.
Yeah, I think that, to your point, our generation especially is looking for meaning, and there has to be meaning, and there has to be being able to know that we're giving of ourselves. The trade-off for our time is worth it. It's essentially, this is definitely worth worth the time and worth the trade-off. Before as we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about what you mentioned earlier, but only briefly. You talked about being a woman and a minority woman working in the sports industry. What are some challenges that women face, in particular, in this male-dominated industry?
Well, that could be a show in its own.
We'll come back. We'll do part 2, and we'll talk about that one. But
it's interesting, and I will say I want to give a shout out to all the women in minorities in sports, especially because one thing I've realized is that these women are so talented and they are so smart and they know the business side, and there's a huge difference between knowing sports and being able to knock off stats and talk about players and what they're doing, to knowing the business side and knowing how everything kind of works and why those stats are those stats and how those stats became those stats, because there's a whole business behind it. So shout out to all the women.
Absolutely.
But it's tough, and, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. You have to have a tough skin, and you have to have a certain mindset to be able to work in this industry and to be taken seriously. And, you know, I think that it kind of makes a lot of women very hard, because you are constantly proving yourself. And because the things that I've heard just as a woman coming into this industry or working with different athletes, you know, and I've had both sides. I've worked with some NFL players who are just like so dope, who respect the work, who are like, yo, you are amazing to work with. And I've worked with guys who, you know, were only interested in the way I looked. And were very disrespectful about it. And, you know, not to mention always trying to prove yourself to even some coworkers, whether or not it's proving that you actually know sports, that you can talk stats and business, to, you know, proving that you're not there because you want to sleep with athletes. You know, I've had to make it so clear so many times, like, you know, if I'm going to be a groupie, I'm going to the top. Like, I'm not going to be a groupie of a player. I need somebody I can pass the resume to. So it's like, you know what I mean? You got to be strategic. So for me, I'm like, I'm not in this to sleep with players or to, you know, be a groupie, because I'm like, some of y'all know the industry from the inside out, and I know how much clout the players have. So I also, from working with players, know how easy some of that money can be gone. So none of that, I'm not blinded or intrigued by any of that. Because to me, that was always their life, and my life was mine. And I have always made that very clear from the beginning. You know, I would say things like, it'd be cool to work events and all these events that people think are awesome to go to, but you don't realize that as an quote-unquote employee of the industry, like, that's just not your life. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, when you have all these high-powered people hopping in their chauffeured cars home, I'm putting on my sneakers so I can hop on the train and go back uptown. So it's like, you know, or calling a Uber. So I think that's one of the points of working as a woman in this industry, just to kind of like just be thick-skinned and know your worth and be able to defend your worth at all costs. Because that's one thing that I have always done, and, you know, and put yourself in a position where no one can say anything about you unless it pertains to your work. So,
you know, you bring up so many great points, and you're right. We're going to have to do a part 2 specifically about women, because when we think about, like, when you mentioned that you go through and what Sarah Spain has gone through and what Jamel Hill and so many other women who we look at and like, man, they're at the, like, pinnacle of sports media, and they're still getting treated like they're not as competent, and they're having to defend their intelligence and their knowledge of sports.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
And those are the women that you see on TV every day, who their job is to talk about that. So imagine the women behind the scenes like us who, you know, we're not on TV talking about sports every day, who have to kind of do double work to show our worth and to kind of prove that and I will go ahead and say it. I love our guys in the group, but one thing I have noticed about our networking group is that the women are so much more on top of the game when it comes to the business side of things. Whenever we've had a question about how something works, or, you know, if a commercial is produced, or something regarding the actual business, I've always seen more of the women in the group being able to actually explain how it happens.
Yeah, I remember there was one day specifically.
You know, and that's no shade.
No shade, no shade at all. Just an observation of what's been happening.
Shade. We have some dope men in the group who are great on the business, but, you know, I've just noticed that when it comes to the business side of things, I've seen more from the women.
I think now some guys are going to start chiming in more on those conversations. Letting us know.
Don't worry, the guys, when it comes to, like, talking about a player and their stats and how they played and, you know, how they rank from the time they started, how they played in college, they're on it. They're on top of it. But when it comes to, like, actual business stuff and how this industry works from the inside, I've just seen more from the women. No shade. It's great, though.
No.
So it's kind of a good mixture. It's a great mixture to have both sides.
It is. And, you know, every day you're going to get these really great conversations. Some of it is just bantering back and forth and people talking trash, you know, about their favorite teams. And other times, you know, we talk about real stuff and we're celebrating true successes, which makes it invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. So as we close, 3 quick questions for you as we wrap up. 1.
Okay.
What are you most excited about for 2017?
And this is going to sound cliche, but I'm excited for the growth of MIS. You know, we're working on so many different things, so I'm excited to see those things come to fruition and to see, you know, people in the group glow up. Like, I'm excited about the glow up from not only the members in the group, but the group itself. So that's really what I'm excited about.
Yep, no doubt. Tell me, what's the best advice you've ever received that you like to share?
The best advice that I've ever received was to kind of be prepared for anything. I've been told very early on that this industry is not as fun as people think, and you have to be prepared to do pretty much the most manual of the work to the most glamorous. You know, I remember there was a day when I was working for the Nets where we literally had to sit down all day and separate tickets manually we were doing some sort of community relations thing, and all the tickets came in like one sheet. So like thousands of tickets for all these kids. And we really had to sit on the floor. You had to separate the tickets. Like, you can't give a sheet of 100 tickets to, you know, some parent. So we had to separate the tickets and make them individual tickets, and it was just part of the job. Like, who else was going to do it? So, but that's just, you know, one of the things that I learned very early on is that you have to be open and willing to kind of do anything. Yeah. It's not always going to be glamorous 24/7.
No, like,
so.
This is such a great point for life in general. Any level of success that we reach, anything we strive for, the stuff that gets you there is not glamorous at all. The late nights, the long meetings, like the grind is not glamorous by any means.
Exactly. No, not at all.
And our final question of the day is, what is your favorite quote? Like, what's this quote you can read that just touches you and helps you continue to go forward?
It is a quote by the GOAT, Michelle Roberts, who is also executive director of the National Basketball Players Association.
Yes.
And in an interview in the past, we read it verbatim. She has said, "My past is littered with the bones of men who were foolish enough to think I was someone they could sleep on.
Oh, that is so dope.
It's so dope. It's between that and a quote from Dumbledore. And hold on, Dumbledore from Harry Potter.
Okay.
Who, of course, is another goat in himself. But my favorite quote is, happiness can be found in the darkest of times as long as one remembers to turn on the light. So those two quotes are usually kind of what get me going. Michelle Roberts' quote, I always look to that when I'm just like, yo, you gotta stay on the grind. Like, who cares what people say? Remember, you can't be slept on. And then the Dumbledore one is always like, when things aren't going my way or when you start to get stressful, you always gotta remember there's happiness somewhere. You just gotta find it. So.
Absolutely. That is awesome. Great way to close. Shaina, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about MIS, how can they reach you?
So you can find me on all social media platforms, and I'm the same. On Facebook is just my name, Shaina Wiel, but everywhere else it's Shy MW, so it's SHAI, M as in Mary, W. And that's on Facebook. Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. That is my personal page, so you'll see a mixture of my feelings. I like to tweet through my feelings. Personally, that's my personal journal. But for MIS, you can find us everywhere as MI Sports Biz. And that's on Twitter, Instagram. We just opened a Facebook page. We're in the process of building that. But Twitter and Instagram is where we're really heavy right now. And basically, the majority of the content you'll see there are just really the dope things that people of color are doing in the industry. We try to highlight everything that we see. So from members in the group to athletes to behind-the-scenes executives that you didn't even know existed, but are super dope.
Shaina, thank you so much for joining me. Those of you who are listening, definitely reach out to Shaina, learn more about MIS, become a part of the group, share your talents, your gifts, support some minorities who are doing extraordinary things in sports. And thanks again. I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela. This is cool.
This is Athletes as Educators.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes as Educators podcast. Connect with me through the Athletes as Educators Facebook page or at Athletes Educate on Instagram. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. For more resources and information about today's podcast, you can check us out at AngelaRLewis.com.